Vietnam claimed its share of tragedies. One great thing that's happened, though, is there are some survivors, and one of the survivors, Dr. Hugh Nguyen, is with us right here on Public Exposure tonight. Thank you very much, and I'm Stan Emert. Dr. Nguyen, thank you for being with the show.
I feel great and blessed to be here with you.
So if it's okay, I'm going to call you Hugh.
Yes.
Because this is a personal story as opposed to a professional story, huh? But
like
first off, you're here in part through the World Affairs Council. So tell us what you do with the World Affairs Council.
So I volunteer for the organization called EDI, Executive Development Institute. The mission is to develop diverse leaders. World Affairs Council is one of the non-profit organizations that we elected to help, and that's how I got to know World Affairs Council.
Mm-hmm. And you speak with just a little bit of an accent, so where does that come from?
So was born and raised in Saigon, Vietnam, left home as a teenager. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was 16, mom and dad said, well, there's no future for you here. Just trying to find a way and get on that boat, and if you make it out, good luck to you, and along the way, make sure you work hard, and once you make it, spend time and devote your energy to help others.
And we're going to talk about that journey and some difficult times for you, so thank you very much for being with us and willing to talk about those difficult times so that we can understand more. But I referred to you as doctor. You're a PhD.
Yes.
And an engineer with Puget Sound Energy?
I work for Puget Sound Energy, came here in America in 1981, persevered my way, received my BS degree in 1987, and out to get my master's degree a year after that. Worked for a number of companies, and eventually I went back to school in 1992 to get my PhD in electrical engineering.
Wow. It's not very often we have such a smart guy sitting here with us, so thanks again. Now let's get to your story. But first, Vietnam today. It's a beautiful country. I mean, there's some gorgeous pictures there of the country where you grew up. But I want to take you back to about 1970. Let's go to Saigon, 1970. Now, downtown Saigon. There we are. Does that look familiar?
It looks familiar to me, but it's been a long time. I was only 6 at the time in 1970. Remember, Mom and Dad brought me to the city a few times on the back of a motorcycle.
Mm-hmm. And that was kind of at the height of the war. That was 1970, wasn't it? I mean, how was it like for you living in the middle of a war zone?
So we were a little bit more fortunate than most people out in the country experienced a lot of war events, but we live inside Saigon, so we saw a lot of events on TV, and every now and then we have a terrorist activity, somebody drop a bomb out of nowhere. But I did not see the full war until 1975, when the communists from the north came to the south and took over.
So did you even know then that besides what you saw on television, did you know that there was a strong likelihood that your country was going to change drastically?
Back then, I did not know a whole lot. As a youngster, I was very much sheltered by my family. Of course, a lot of events on TV, we allowed to watch TV a few every now and then, and there were a lot of propaganda. So for me to understand back then was a little bit difficult.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the propaganda? What were you being told?
Well, from the south would persecute the north. They would portray some image of the north, vice versa. So the information I got from TV was very distorted. I did not learn everything until I came to the States when in 1981.
Let's go to the next picture, and this is a very famous picture. April 30th, 1975, the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. Do you remember that day?
I do remember that day. We were sheltered in a local elementary school. A lot of people were lucky enough to get out on that day. They went to the embassy of Saigon, and they made their way to either by boat or by helicopters, but we were not around. So those people who left behind trying to find a way to escape a different route from 1975 on to 1980s. People just use boats as the mean to escape out of the country.
So I suspect on that day that you were, by that time you were, what, 11 years old? 10 years old, and you were probably afraid.
Very afraid.
Do you know what you were afraid of?
Well, because back then, my mom and dad left the North, went to the South just because they were Catholic, and they were afraid of being persecuted. So to me, a communist person back then as a youngster would be having, you know, 4 eyes or horns growing out of their head. So I was very scared. But then until I saw the army came in, I said, well, it's just like us. They look just like us. And I still remember that memory.
They look just like you.
They look just like me.
Your parents now, was your father in the military?
He was not out there fighting, but he worked for the military in the office.
So I suspect he was very scared then on April 30th, 1975. What was he saying? What was he saying to do?
So stay quiet and do what you are told. A lot of them, when the people come to your asking, you have to go somewhere, you better listen. And a lot of them at first say, well, you're going to have to go to some kind of camp to retrain your thoughts.
To retrain your thoughts.
Retrain your thoughts.
Actually, let's go to the next graphic, because after Vietnam, after 1975, and there's a picture of someone who was imprisoned. An estimated 1 million were imprisoned in Vietnamese re-education camps following the Vietnam War. There is research that shows that 165,000 Vietnamese died in those re-education camps, and 1 out of 3 South Vietnamese families had someone in a re-education camp, including your family.
Right. I was more fortunate than most. He spent about 3 days, but my father-in-law that I later married my wife and learned that he spent 8 years in the camp.
8 years in a re-education camp?
8 years in the re-education camp.
I suspect you've talked with him about that experience. What does he say?
He's very bitter, the way that he was treated. But of course, that's post-war. War does not bring a whole lot of benefits to the human race, and that's one of the things that unfortunately had to happen.
And then some people were in one of the 150 camps for as long as 17 being what? You on the outside during that 5-year period of time before you left, 6-year period of time, what were you hearing about the re-education camps?
There were a lot of torturing. There were a lot of persecution, and they were just being bullied without a voice. Of course, they just had to find a way to survive somehow.
Let me ask this. We saw the picture from April 30th, 1975 of the helicopter leaving the U.S. Embassy. That was the Americans leaving. Were you bitter at the time or angry at the Americans for leaving? And I'm going to leave you with that for just a moment. Tonight's guest is very, very special. Dr. Hugh Nguyen is someone who survived he's a Vietnamese boat person, and he's someone who survived and has flourished here in the United States, and is a tremendous story that I hope that we all will listen to. Strongly encourage you to learn more about Dr. Nguyen on worldaffairs.org, and more about the work of the World Affairs Council that Dr. Nguyen volunteers for.